the betting market has sort of been taking more of the season-long approach versus the what we've seen over the last 4 weeks approach. And it happened last week with the AFC title game where a lot of people liked Baltimore. I liked Baltimore as well last week. I went ahead and laid the points with them. That got all the way out as high as 5, but ended up closing 4.5, because if you looked at the season-long data, it would lead you to believe that the Ravens are the better team. They should win the game, but that's not how it played out. And I think as well, that's what's kind of sort of happening here with this market, is that if you look at the season-long data over the course of 18 weeks of the regular season, the Niners were the better football team. So on a neutral site, they should be favored. But over what we've seen over these last 4 weeks, if you just plop down and watch these two teams and didn't watch much of the season, just watch the playoffs and maybe the last couple weeks of the regular season, I think you'd come to the conclusion that Kansas City is just playing better football. And so it's kind of what do you value, sort of, you know?
It's hard to judge it, because I think one of the things you have to do as handicappers, you got to throw out the games that really don't mean anything, right? Mm-hmm. You have to kind of throw them away, and you got to say, okay, this game didn't mean anything. But we know this: the two coaches are really good at offensive design. These two coaches are really good at game planning, of really putting the situation and moving the football against good defenses. I think one of the things that hasn't gotten talked enough about is how Andy Reid has improved his offensive line play, right? This offensive line was a weakness for the team for most of the season. Watch the Raider tape when the Raiders just kicked their butt, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the Raiders were really able to move the football on them. And so because of that, they turned the ball over twice, the Raiders did. And Andy was trying to be creative on one play, fumble touchdown, and then, the out route to Jack Jones picked off for another 14 points. So, I think they've moved away from trying to be that way, but the turnover by Hardman, really helped Baltimore out. I mean, it helped Buffalo out tremendously. So this one's hard. I just don't have enough evidence to feel comfortable with San Francisco yet.
Well, which head coach do you give the edge in this matchup? Two terrific head coaches, Andy Reid, Kyle Shanahan. Shanahan in pursuit of his first Super Bowl victory. Who do you give the edge to in the head coaching matchup?
Well, I give it to Reid only because I think that Reid's challenge against this 49er defense, which is essentially a basic defense that doesn't really do a lot of things, is going to be an advantage. Reid knows that if they try to play zone against him, he has every West Coast short pass that he can throw, sticks, option, all these things, right? And then he's got to sit there. Will they play man-to-man? Will we get into a man-to-man game with them? If the strategy of San Francisco's defense, to me, is the most important thing that I'm going to be looking for in the first quarter. Because if they try to play zone like Baltimore did, it's going to be a 12-play drive touchdown. And if they get into man-to-man and they don't have the right guy covering Kelsey, it could be a problem as well. Hamilton was one of the best cover guys in the league on tight ends, and it was just perfect execution. He was covered, but as Bill Parcells often would say, even when he's covered, he's open. And so you got to throw him the football. To me, that's the chess match. I think, look, Kyle, one thing I do know is Mike Shanahan, Kyle's father, still watches tape. He's like, he's like a lot of us that, even though we're not in the game, we're in the game. You're watching it, because it's part of your DNA. It's kind of who you are. And he's been in these games before, and I think probably he'll be a guy that Kyle relies on a lot, especially what people don't realize about Mike is Mike was really very good at understanding how to play defense, right? I think Mike was the instrument of change in San Francisco to get away from the Seattle defense and move closer into more multiplicity. Now, they haven't gone all the way in there, but I think he'll have an impact a little bit in terms of, I'm not saying he's going to coach the defense by no means. I'm saying he's going to strategize and help them. What could we do to stop Reid? Because who knows the West Coast offense the most? Mike Shanahan.
Yeah.
Reid, Shanahan. Those guys were born in it.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point to bring up. I mean, we see in the broadcast, like you'll see the shot of Mike Shanahan kind of up in one of the suites. You can tell he's dialed in, man. Like he's not up there just like having a good time. He's dialed. Yeah, he's dialed all the way.
Look, I mean, Billy Callahan has to be the happiest guy on planet Earth. I mean,
100%.
He got out of Cleveland to go coach with his son, who got one of the 32 head coaching jobs in the league. And Cleveland clearly had to let him go because he had contracts, and he's one of the highest paid offensive line coaches in the league, and he was able to get to Tennessee. So that's a huge, huge loss for Cleveland. Huge loss for Cleveland. So that's going to be one worth discussing in the offseason.
Yeah, no, everywhere he's gone, he's made the offensive line much better. Cleveland's offensive line pretty good this year, so we'll see how they can get that. They got to get healthy on that offensive line for the Browns, but that's talk for a later day. The coordinator battle, the play callers, Andy Reid will be going up against Steve Wilks. You mentioned how Mike Shanahan, Kyle Shanahan will be helping out with the defensive game plan because they understand defense pretty well. But how do you see Wilks sort of matching up with this Chiefs offense that the script has looked good, but after the script, then they kind of go into this, I don't know if it's a conservative mode or what have you, but they just don't seem to make explosive plays.
Well, I think what they do is they kind of, the other team adjusts to what they want to do. They kind of catch them off guard in formations. I mean, if they go back and think about it, first play of the game, a little check, a little pass to Kelsey, get it going. Then the next play of the game, they go empty, and they see if they're in man or zone. They throw a hitch out there to Pacheco. All of a sudden, they come back. They run an inside run. You know, they kind of, that script kind of was able for Andy to see how they wanted to play it. That's going to be the challenge, right? That's going to be the thing that Steve Wilks has got to say, okay, fellas, we got to bring it quick. We got to play hard. We're going to use our best stuff. I mean, I would say if I were Kyle, I would be telling Wilks, use some of your best stuff early in the game. Don't save it for the fourth quarter. Don't save it later. Use your best stuff. Let's find some things to get them out of their rhythm. We have got to get them out of their rhythm. Now, we can adjust later in the game to if they kind of start to get into a rhythm, but we've got to start the game getting them out of their rhythm. We can't allow Mahomes to go 10 for 10, 11 for 11 like he did against Baltimore.
And if they're able to get them out of the rhythm, that first quarter total is at 9.5. It's usually around that range for the Super Bowl, 10 or 9.5 or so. Maybe it's a first quarter under. Some of these Super Bowls tend to get off to slower starts with the two teams feeling each other out. As you said, like the first quarter is one game, the second and third quarter is another game, then the fourth quarter is a standalone game. Like there's the games within the games, as we often see in the Super Bowl. The other side of it, Kyle Shanahan against Steve Spagnuolo, like that's like what football's all about right there. As a fan, you got to love that matchup.
Yep. Well, and Kyle's going to try to do some things formationally to try to see if he can get them to have some confusion and make some mistakes defensively. I mean, that's what he's got to try to do. And, you know, when they played 2 years ago, when the San Francisco wasn't healthy, you know, and Kansas City went in there and just destroyed them. Do you remember that game? I mean, the 49ers were beat up in that game, and they didn't have they lost to Atlanta the week before, and then they came back home, and Kansas City had their way. I'm not sure that tape's relevant, but I'm sure that tape will be something Kyle watched a lot of to figure out how he's going to handle all this stuff, and he's going to put a lot on Purdy's plate to get them into the right protection.
Yeah, I believe that was the Niners' last loss of the season until they lost the NFC title game to the Philadelphia Eagles. They were able to rip off a bunch of those victories. All right, so that is the coaching battle. On the other side, let's battle out with some of these props. Bettor's Choice next here on the Lombardi Line.